What's up, Gran Turismo fans? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you what a typical Monday looks like for me with the new daily races, how I go about unlocking more race pace, improving my race pace over the course of the day or even the next day, and if you guys apply these same principles, you will notice improvements in your race pace as well. What you're looking at here is the fastest finishing time that Digit posted on Monday. So Digit rather dominated Monday with quite a number of wins. This was the fastest finishing time. So this is our target. This is our reference. We're looking to see how close can we get to a 21 minute, 21 second finishing time. Now, I'm not 9 seconds slower than Digit as you see here over the course of the race. I had a moment in this race, if memory serves, where I nearly lost control of the car but saved it. But at the same time, Digit is faster than me at this combination, so let's see if we can close that gap a bit. Now, I've talked many times in my videos, particularly recently, about the importance of racing as much as possible, and to that end, that would also include not time trialing extensively before your first race. Now, if you're already nervous or anxious about racing and you time trial as much as possible before your first race, the more time you spend in time trial, the more you are building self-imposed expectations for your first race, which only makes the whole situation of nerves and anxiety get worse, right? So, how do you solve that? You go and race as soon as possible. So my routine on Monday morning is to warm up. Maybe I get 10-20 minutes, that's about it. Sometimes I've gone in with as little as half a lap and just start racing as soon as possible. Now, I know what you're thinking. Luke, this works for you because you're an alien, you're already fast, you can just jump into a race with virtually no practice and no warm-up. Firstly, I'm not an alien. Okay, that's another topic, not going to talk about that here right now. The not being a natural alien is part of what makes me a good teacher, because I have to figure this stuff out in detail, and the more I figure it out, the more I can explain to you guys how you need to do it. So, here's the bad news. There's no reason why this doesn't work at your level too. So, what are you looking for before you go racing? You need to know where the breakpoints are, basically where you should be braking. You need to know which way the turns go, what the track looks like. You need to know what turn is coming next, basically. Once you can string together 10, 15, 20 laps without spinning off track, but also, quote, not pushing. That's very important, because if you push hard in time trial, you're going to spin and crash, right? So, if you can just string together 10, 15, 20 laps at somewhere between 85-90% effort and not crash, you are ready to go racing. The only reason you're not racing is because you're trying to use time trial to get faster before you race, which in turn puts a massive amount of self-imposed expectations on you. I've spoken about all of that before. So, just get stuck in and race and use races to build your pace, not time trial. If you've never done this before, it's an absolute game changer, I promise you. I literally had one student this very week, regular student, who spent most of Monday in time trial. He said, this is a very difficult car, it's a very difficult combination. Do you have any advice, Luke? I said, have you raced yet? Not, how is your braking? Let's have a look at your replay. Let's try and analyze what you're technically doing with the car. None of that. Just, have you raced yet? So he went and raced. Do it on an alt account if you want to. If you're trying to protect the DR on your main, that's fine. Just race. He went and raced, and after a handful of races, he went into time trial, and he set a faster lap very quickly. That's what happens. So if you've never tried this before, you have to let go of the fear of bad results and the fear of DR in order to do this. So it will actually help you psychologically as well, because you will be less afraid of losing DR when you're automatically starting at the back. You will be less afraid of finishing last when you're starting last. And you will find pace in a race situation, which is of far more value than finding it in a time trial situation. Me personally, I like to start at the back. It takes all the pressure off. It allows me to just settle into the race at my own pace. I don't have to push for the win because I'm starting at the back. You can't push anyway because there's drivers in front of you. It just lets me settle into a rhythm without feeling like I'm under any kind of pressure. And it will definitely do the same thing for you. So as you can see, we started at the back in this race. I think I started like 15th, maybe even 16th, something like that. Worked our way up to 5th place. Great race here with Motor Insider, a fellow driver I've raced against for many years, very much on my level. I think he burnt his tyres out. I got a feeling he pitted too early. It was still early in the day and no one really kind of knew what the strategies were. And you can see that the real aliens, Nicholas, Damien, Wind, who started at the back as well, you can see here that they finished quite significantly ahead of me. And Digit would have done the same thing if he'd started from the back. So that's the difference between me and those guys. But I still brought home P5 through largely trying to avoid engagements, just keep it on the track and stay out of trouble and find your pace naturally. So, later on the same day. Now, you can see here I've started on pole position. Now, this wasn't deliberate. I'll explain what happened here. I will then start setting qualifying times. Once I've done a few races from the back, 2, 3 at most normally, I will start setting qualifying times. Now don't fall into the time trial trap. Don't think I've done 2 or 3 races, go and spend 4 hours in time trial. It doesn't work like that. You have to set time trial laps that reflect your pace. So if you go and then spend 4 or 5 hours in time trial after doing only a handful of races, you're still going to end up in that same situation that you've put a tremendous amount of pressure on yourself. Just set time trial laps where possible between races. If the gap between races isn't big enough, miss one race. That's it, just one race. So what I did was I went and had lunch, came back, and whilst the active race is ongoing, I set a time trial lap. I didn't know that lap was going to be enough to put me on pole position, but it was, okay? That's a sign of the improvement. For you guys, it might only put you 8th place. That's fine. It's a lap that is within your capabilities and you can run at a race pace that matches that time trial lap rather than pushing time trial endlessly, getting that magic lap and then not being able to back it up in the race. However, despite starting on pole, as you can see, Digit was faster than me. Now I know you've seen me hang on to Digit at some combinations, particularly I can name tracks that I love that I'm really good at: Watkins Glen, Autopolis, not bad at Nordschleife now, Nürburgring GP track, pretty good there, Fuji, not bad there. You've seen me hang on to these really fast drivers like Digit and other guys that are even faster than Digit, right? But it's not always there. Now, I'm not going to make the excuse that Suzuka is a weak track for me. It's not, but it's not a strong track either. I like it. I really like the track, but it's a very difficult track. So as you can see, I was happy to let Digit go. If someone's faster than you, the best thing you can do for your development is drop the ego and let them go, and try to see how long you can stay with them. You'll develop much more as a driver doing that than if you fight for every position like your life depends on it. So, as you can see, I managed to stay with Digit for about half the race. There was a few small minor mistakes in there, but between the slipstream and the odd bump draft from NDO behind me, we stayed in touch, or I stayed in touch. But then there's the odd mistake like that, running a bit wide, getting on the throttle a bit too early, and you can see that Digit just edges away from me. And as we jump forwards to the end of the race, the gap was 3 seconds over the course of the race. Now, I apologise for not having the lap delta relative on the top left-hand side. I had to use a replay here. I'd forgotten to save the PSN footage, but it was 3 seconds basically across the line. But then Digit tried to do a handbrake turn across the line and realised he didn't have a handbrake in daily races, so the gap was actually shown 2.5 seconds. But we've got a 3-second deficit to make up for, okay? So 3 seconds slower than Digit over the course of the race is not too shabby, but we've got work to do. Let's see if we can find more pace. Now, there's a fascinating psychological conditioning that takes place when you approach a new week of races this way. The more you race, the more you become comfortable with racing. The more you become comfortable with racing, the more you settle into the rhythm of driving the track. the more you settle into the rhythm of driving the track, the more you find that magical flow state in a race, and that becomes addictive. And you actually reach a point where you don't want to go into time trial for hours at a time. How quickly and how easily I find that flow state comes down to how comfortable I am with a given track. So if it's one of the aforementioned strong tracks, then I'm going to find that flow state a lot quicker. If it's a weak track, it's going to be pretty slow. If it's a middle of the road track like Suzuka, then that flow state for me didn't really arrive until this race here. So this is later in the evening, Digit has stopped racing, and this is the first time I've truly had the flow state all day. Now this is pivotal because it took me a day of racing with this approach to find that flow state. You're not going to find it if you just grind time trial and then put a ton of pressure on yourself when you go racing. You're not going to find that flow state. You only find it this way. And as you can see, I'm actually pulling away from the pack. Now, it's worth mentioning Key started on P2 right behind me. I think you saw that at the beginning. He had a moment coming out of Degner 2, saved it, incredible save, and then worked his way back up to P2. Now, I'm not faster than Key. Let me just put that out there, right? Give or take about the same, depending on what the combination is, would be my assessment. But what was fascinating to me was that when Key got into P2, he didn't close. So Key is one of those drivers that you naturally look to as, wouldn't it be amazing to be as fast as him one day? I did that when I first started Gran Turismo. To actually be able to race Key on pace, which I've been able to do for a while, but then to beat him fair and square in this race, again, I'm not bragging, I'm not saying I'm faster than Key, but you can see the development that's happening because of the way I approach my races. And as we jump forwards to the point where I exited the pits, Key pitted one lap earlier than me, so he's got older tyres, and I deliberately held back on the outlap to look after my tyres, and this is as close as the gap ever got, because when we jump forwards to the end of the race, I managed my tyres better than Key, and I actually pulled away from him to I think about a 5-second lead. And the race finishing time demonstrated this improvement as well. I'd got it down to a 21-minute 24-second finishing time, which is only a few seconds off of Digit's pace, but we aren't done yet. We've got one more trick up our sleeve to try. Now it's usually around about this kind of time that I like to see if I can tweak the force feedback settings to see if I can eke out a little bit more pace for the specific car that I'm driving. Now that might sound quite abstract. What am I talking about there? So firstly, you're going to need a little bit of background here. Prior to game update 1.49, force feedback in group cars used to feel pretty much uniformly across the board the same from one car to the next. The total weight of the force feedback, the wheel rotation, the way the cars felt, they all pretty much felt exactly the same. You didn't really have to change the force feedback from one car to the next. When 1.49 launched, they changed the way force feedback works. In an attempt to provide authenticity and uniqueness in feel from one car to the next, they changed force feedback on a per car basis. So if you've ever noticed that you can feel the force feedback on what the car is doing underneath you much better in one car than you can in another car within the same group, even within group 2, within group 3, that's what you're feeling. You are feeling bespoke force feedback on a per car basis, and some you'll be able to connect with much more than others. Now there are two parameters that I change in order to compensate for this. For the most part, my force feedback settings don't change. I will do a video on my overall force feedback settings one day. In the meantime, you can get them on the Digit Racing Discord server if you want them. Most of it does not change at all. The only two parameters that do change is the overall gain, the overall force feedback strength. Some cars have less force feedback, other cars have more force feedback. I have to adjust it for myself accordingly to get the force feedback weight, the resistance of the wheel, back into the sweet spot that I prefer it to be. Now, if you don't need to do this, If you can just adapt to whatever force feedback you're given on a per car basis and still be equally as quick, you're a more talented driver than I am. Fair play to you. This is what I personally need to do. The second parameter that I change is the wheel rotation, which on Fanatec is called the sensitivity of the steering wheel. Just to be extremely clear what I'm talking about here, this is how far you have to rotate the wheel to achieve full lock. So you can adjust that on a Fanatec steering wheel. Now, a word of caution here. I strongly advise, if you're not knocking on the door of top 100 level already, that you don't do this, because lower ranked drivers already brake and turn too much as it is. So by adding faster steering in, you're only going to exacerbate that same problem. Let me explain what I do, and then you can be the judge of what you want to experiment with. And that's the key point here. That's what I'm encouraging, is experimentation. When I adjust the wheel rotation, what it does is give me a much more immediate connection with the car. So when I turn the steering wheel, there's that weight of resistance of the front tires, the friction circle, the grip that you're feeling in those front tires. When I can feel that that's a little bit vague, I'm not quite in tune with the car, I'm not quite feeling the car the way I need to push that last tenth or two, I will go into cockpit view of the car, and I will check how close auto rotation, the stock rotation value, is to the rotation of the animation of the steering wheel on the screen. And since 1.49 is often quite inaccurate, I've done months of experimentation with this, and this is what I've concluded. The starting point, if I feel that I'm not quite connected to the car the way I want to be, is that I will reduce the rotation on the steering wheel in my hands until it matches perfectly the rotation in the cockpit view, which technically is where auto rotation should be in the first place. And I will go out and drive. That's where I started this on Monday morning, and I think that put me at 540 degrees. By Monday evening, Tuesday morning, little bit of experimentation. What I will then do is experiment with 10 to 30 degrees less than the standard stock value comparing to the in-car animation. No more than that. I have tried more than that. I have been very fast with settings as low as 470 degrees. I've also caused myself to have too much tyre wear, caused myself to lock the fronts up too easily. After much experimentation, what I have concluded is I don't get faster at anything more than 30 degrees below that stock value. So, where I ended up with the GTR was 510 degrees, which is exactly where I ended up with the GTR at Lago Maggiore when, I don't know how to pronounce that, when we had the last Group 2 race. That's not a coincidence. And I deliberately didn't put that value in on Monday morning because I wanted to see if it really was going to give me that last 1 or 2 tenths. And it did. Some cars I don't have to do this with. Some cars I can run the stock value, others I can't. Some cars I don't have to change the overall force feedback gain, others I do. The Group 2 Nissan GTR is one car where I have to adjust both of them. Having got them both where I needed them to be, that made the difference. I suddenly had a lot more connection with the car, a lot more confidence with the car. What changed was the sense of knowing where the front wheels were and what they were doing and how much grip there was, which is everything, basically. I mean, it doesn't get more important than that. So, circle this back round to you guys. Should you guys consider doing this? Like I said, I strongly advise against adjusting force feedback rotation, wheel rotation, unless you know what you're doing. It's not going to be a magic fix. It's the last of marginal gains. If you're talking about being seconds off the pace, this is the last thing you should consider doing. I've only actually ever encountered one other driver that does that. I'm sure there are others, but the only one I know of that's noteworthy, that's well known, is Z28 Gaming. He recently changed his name. He rebranded to Zector1, so I'll call him Zector1. But just so you know who I was talking about, he used to be Z28 Gaming. If you've ever watched his streams, he constantly changes the wheel rotation value for the given car. I've never actually encountered anyone else that does it on a per car basis. Maybe there are, maybe there aren't. What I am circling this back round to you guys, the general masses, the lower ranked drivers, what I am encouraging you to do is be experimentational with your force feedback, because one extremely common trait that I see in coaching is that people have bought an expensive direct drive wheel that has the capacity to change individual force feedback protocols on the wheel, not just in the game, and they never do anything with it. Now, if you're fast with completely stock force feedback values, fine, you don't need to do anything. But my experience from coaching, just like people's brake pedals, is that there is quite a lot of time to be found setting up your force feedback, your brake pedal, your rig, all correctly and optimally for you. The major mistake that people make is assuming that because they have a Fanatec wheel, that the force feedback settings seem quite complicated. I'll just go with whatever. So I'll use someone else's force feedback settings or the auto settings. You might luck in, but most average Joes don't. And once we adjust those things in coaching with some general guidelines, they tend to get better. Now, as I said, the wheel rotation is not something I think you should play with yet until you get to a certain level. But the rest of your force feedback settings, absolutely. You should be experimenting with them. You should be proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that you've got the optimal force feedback settings for what you want, and the same with your brake pedal. Even the same with your seating position. Whether you are on a rig or a desk, there are always things you can do to improve your connection with the car. What I'm driving at here in this recent series of videos dealing with finding race pace, psychological problems, rig optimization, is leave no stone unturned. Just meditate on that for a second, because that's why I'm a quote-unquote fast driver. That's why I've achieved what I have. There is some talent there, there's some aptitude there, but the rest of it is that I'm a student of the game. I literally leave no stone unturned in my quest for improvement, and most every stone I've unturned has led to some kind of small incremental improvement. And that's why bringing this back full circle around to the topic of this video, improving race pace, that's why when I finish 3 seconds adrift of Digit on Monday, I feel fairly confident that I can close that gap. Maybe the next 24 hours, maybe the end of the week, but it can be done. And so that brought us to this race. Driver behind ZZ is a moderator on the Digit Racing Discord server. I've always thought of him as being slightly faster than me. That's always, ever since I've known him back when we raced on PS4 together, he's always been just slightly faster than me. No matter how much I improve, he's slightly faster than me. But that's great. You need those kind of people because they push you to get better. I'll link his YouTube channel in the description at the end, so yeah, go give him a sub. So jumping forwards to the end of the race, you can see that we were still doing 44s on lap 11. And I will say at this point the conditions were 2 degrees cooler than Digit's benchmark race, the target finishing time that we're trying to aim for, the 21:21. So these temperatures were 2 degrees cooler, which means it is quicker conditions. However, we lost, I estimate, at least 3 seconds in battling. Particularly on this last lap, I was getting quite defensive, and ZZ goes for an overtake into this hairpin. He gets it done. I and just didn't move over to defend it quick enough. So fair play to him. He got the race win. I'm not really that interested in having one come second or podium. What I care about, remember, is that race finishing time. So there's the move for the lead. Gave him room. He gave me room. I can always trust him. He took the lead. I never managed to get it back. But as we fast forward to the finishing line, we crossed the line with a 21 minutes 23 second race finishing time. Now Digit did a 21:21. Bear in mind that we had at least 3 seconds worth of time loss in battling, which would have put us down to a 21:20, slightly faster than Digit in slightly faster conditions. Digit's still faster than me, particularly at this combination, but it's close enough for me. I'm happy with it. And after these last 3 videos dealing with race psychology, it's probably never truer for me to say my tagline, get out of here and go race.